Making headlines for this week of November 25th. Thanks for what? Security agencies in North Dakota insult traditional U.S. understanding of Thanksgiving. Raging on Russia. Unelected EU leadership passes resolution making Russia as big a threat as Daesh, while other movements around Europe suggest something else. Disclosure win-win. Stephen Bassett presents potential scenario where disclosure could bring a win for everyone. And the change is normal. Geologist speaks to the climate hoax to UK politicians.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. While the people of the U.S. celebrate their Thanksgiving holiday at this time, the more awakened and aware people may rightfully ask what it is that the U.S. people have to be thankful for. All people living on the geographical land known as the United States are as much slaves to the global cabal as any other group of people. The elitists of the U.S., however, have been giving thanks at this time that the people have not figured out their little game and begun seeking an end to it. Until now. Knowing that Wikipedia cannot always be trusted with information posted on its pages, I advise discernment as I reference a Wikipedia page about the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. According to this page, Americans commonly trace the Thanksgiving holiday to a 1621 celebration at the Plymouth Plantation, where the settlers held a harvest feast after a successful growing season. Autumn or early winter feasts continued sporadically in later years, first as an impromptu religious observance and later as a civil tradition. Squanto, a Patuxet Native American who resided with the Wampanoag tribe, taught the pilgrims how to catch eel and grow corn and served as an interpreter for them. Squanto had learned the English language during his enslavement in England. The Wampanoag leader, Massasoit, had given food to the colonists during the first winter when supplies brought from England were insufficient. 17th century accounts do not identify this as a Thanksgiving observance, rather it followed the harvest. The page notes the celebratory feast as including 50 of the original 100 who arrived aboard the Mayflower and 90 indigenous people. So how is the kindness first shown to the arriving settlers repaid? Well, history has already made this clear, and now, almost 400 years later, the original meaning of the gathering has long been lost and turned into a commercial holiday that is arguably the biggest holiday of the year, bigger than Christmas. There is some hope, and I will come to this in a moment. In the past week or so, events have taken a more drastic turn in North Dakota as news is filtering out about increased aggression and harm being caused by numerous security agencies that are involved in the Dakota Access Pipeline project and the multiple thousands of water protectors who have been courageously standing their ground. The violent engagement by security forces began on November 20th. The Free Thought Project website reported on November 21st that demonstrators protesting against Dakota Access Pipeline say they are trapped on a bridge as North Dakota police fire tear gas, water cannon, and concussion grenades at them, according to live reports on social media. Officers have deployed water cannons on the protectors in below freezing temperatures and are using long-range acoustic devices, or LRADs. Earlier, there were reports of rubber bullets fired. Vehicles, which appear to be armored Humvees, have arrived at the scene as well. Numerous social media sites began to pick up on the story. In one incident, a concussion grenade has seriously injured 21-year-old Sophia Wilansky. The injury may result in the removal of at least one part of her arm. An article containing a statement from Wilansky's father was posted on the Indian Country Today Media Network website on November 22nd. Also in this article was the following statement from the Standing Rock Medic Healer Council. According to this article, the Council deplores the ongoing use of violence by the state of North Dakota to address the concerns of thousands of people peacefully assembled at Standing Rock to insist on the right to clean, healthy drinking water. Water is life, Mini Wikoni. Jenny Monet, in an article on November 21st, appearing on the same website, noted both the absence of the mainstream media in reporting on the events, or the media's use of negative intonations when reporting on it, implying that the water protectors were the aggressors. The article offers a sampling of the negative headlines from some media, and then adds that these headlined stories were published in places like New York, LA, Atlanta, or otherwise far removed from the action, is fitting. In the aftermath of the presidential elections, critics have started defining this moment in journalism as a media collapse. This fight right now demonstrates the absolute vitalness for independent media and community journalism, said Gold Tooth, lead organizer for the Indigenous Environmental Network. The IEN is one advocacy group that has been galvanizing the anti-pipeline movement. That's how this movement has grown, he said, thousands of voices across Mother Earth. The Indigenous Environmental Network, according to its website, is an alliance of Indigenous peoples whose mission is to protect the sacredness of Earth Mother from contamination and exploitation, while maintaining and respecting Indigenous teachings and natural laws. The source of the problem is becoming increasingly clear. Tracy Rector's article on November 21st, appearing on the Indian Country Today website, wrote the following. Right now, corporations threaten the lifeblood of Mother Earth. There are thousands of water protectors mobilized against the Dakota Access Pipeline in Cannonball, North Dakota, on the traditional territories of the Standing Rock Sioux Nation, guaranteed to this tribe in the 1851 and 1868 treaties with the U.S. government. The activists at Standing Rock are not only concerned with protecting their sovereign rights, history, and land, they're fighting for the health of the land and water for millions of U.S. citizens along the Missouri River. Frankly, they're gifting Americans with an opportunity to critically analyze the state of our so-called democracy, the arrests of journalists, the tactics of humiliation, including strip searching, active surveillance of social media and personal communication, the bogus lies leaked to mainstream media, the destruction of documentarians' equipment, the use of military-grade weapons on unarmed people, and the imposing of felony charges on protectors are all signs to take seriously. For these and many other reasons, the water protectors are asking for all people to stand in solidarity. Their resistance is a wake-up call. We are living in a time of great change, and tribal prophecies have foreshadowed what's to come. There may have been an incentive, however, for security agencies to become more violent over the last week, and this incentive comes in the form of a funder potentially pulling out of the project over the human rights concerns. There are several pieces of good news, however, and possibly even great news coming from Standing Rock. Steve Russell's article appeared the same day on the same website, noting that the combination of the water protectors, raising the human rights issue, and the new discovery of lower-cost shale oil threatens to further depress oil prices at the domestic end in a way that could affect both likely uses for the black snake, referring to the pipeline. The article contains a chart showing all the banks that are funding the project and therefore betting against the North Dakota Sioux community, and by default, against humanity in general. One of those funders is the Norwegian bank DNB. Claire Bernish, in an article on the Before It's News website on November 18th, reported that water protectors from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe can now declare their most tangible victory to date. One of the heftiest investors in the Dakota Access Pipeline, Norway's largest bank, has pulled its assets from the project. Just 10 days ago, DNB warned it might withdraw funding for construction of the contentious pipeline if concerns raised by the Standing Rock Sioux were not addressed promptly. That statement, cited by Reuters, read, DNB looks with worry at how the situation around the pipeline in North Dakota has developed. The bank will therefore take initiative and use its position to bring about a more constructive process to find a solution to the conflict. If these initiatives do not give appeasing answers and results, DNB will consider its further involvement in the financing of the project. A few more celebrities are also getting involved. Several articles have appeared reporting that Jane Fonda was planning to provide at least 5 yurts to house the protectors, and she would also be providing a dinner feast for approximately 500 people. The editorial board of the New York Times ran an opinion article on November 23rd, strongly condemning the engagement of police and security forces against the water protectors. As a result of the growing publicity, thanks to the alternative media and social networks, to name a few, other things are beginning to happen. Jenny Monet, writing for Yes Magazine on November 23rd, writes that organized campaigns to contact the people and agencies responsible for sending officers and equipment to aid Morton County in the assaults on water protectors have, in some cases, been effective. The escalating costs, combined with the public pressure and exposure, is causing some police forces to not send help. If you are one who feels making phone calls or sending letters won't help, you may wish to note this. According to the article, it was intense public response that led Montana's Gallatin County Sheriff Brian Gutkin to literally turn his detail around. He and his deputies were en route to Morton County when Governor Steve Bullock raised concerns about the potential misuse of the interstate statute. The Emergency Management Assistant Compact obligates law enforcement around the country to fulfill requests for aid under any form of emergency or disaster. I got messages from England, Poland, New Zealand, Australia, Gutkin recalled. And he received phone calls and hundreds of emails from his constituents too, people that may have elected him sheriff. They were concerned about the use of force on protectors. On October 27th, he said, and also had been affected by the public outrage from Minneapolis's Hennepin County. Gutkin said the callers and the emailers believed the EMAC was meant for natural disasters and catastrophic events like 9/11. Not for protecting a corporation's pipeline construction. All that caused Sheriff Gutkin to change his mind. He turned to Facebook to post his decision to stand down on Standing Rock. Although my actions were well-intentioned, you made it clear that you do not want your sheriff's office involved in this conflict. One of the biggest differences of an elected sheriff from other law enforcement leaders is that I am directly accountable to the people I serve. Sheriff Dave Mahoney from Wisconsin's Dane County was also empathetic to those decrying deployment of his officers. All share the opinion that our deputies should not be involved in this situation, Mahoney told the Bismarck Tribune. He and his unit stood by Morton County officers for 1 week before pulling out and refusing to return. There is still more positive news. Mark Trahant, in another article on November 17th from Yes Magazine, reported on what he perceived as a sudden shift, a shift that he feels will benefit the water protectors. He writes that a week ago, I was pessimistic about the Dakota Access Pipeline and the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe's attempt to block its construction on treaty lands near the reservation. But then, a couple of things happened. First, on Tuesday, the Obama administration said the Army Corps of Engineers would not take a decision right away. The Army has determined that additional discussion and analysis are warranted in light of the history of the Great Sioux Nation's dispossessions of lands, the importance of the Lake Wahe to the tribe, our government-to-government relationship, and the statute governing easements through government property, a news release said. Trahant continues, "This is huge. This move is brilliant because it ties the decision-making process to an established law that requires federal agencies to consult with tribes." What Trahant is hinting at is that the various court cases government regulations, and processes are going to tie this up for quite some time. The second thing he feels will benefit the water protectors is the market price of oil. By the time anything gets resolved, the price of oil is likely to be such that it is no longer a sustainable project, and this may be another reason banks may want to pull out. On November 23rd, Amy Morris wrote on the Indian Country Today website that news of the military-style response to water protectors resisting the pipeline has reverberated across the nation, with marches of solidarity being held in every major city. On November 12th, dozens of people gathered outside the Atlanta headquarters of CNN in an attempt to draw more attention to the issue from the network. The event was attended by many people from different races and groups, including the Georgia faction of the hacktivist group Anonymous. We stand for unity, peace, love, and protection of the environment, a masked spokesperson for the Georgia Anonymous group told the Indian Country Today network. We feel we are all in this together to fight against oppression and support the same ideas as those opposing big oil. Entertainment events are being planned to support the movement as well. Indian Country Today reported on November 23rd that the Oneida Indian Nation, working in coordination with the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, announced today that it is helping to organize a series of benefit concerts across Indian Country to demonstrate solidarity with Native Americans and their allies who are peacefully and prayerfully protesting the pipeline, and to raise money needed to fund the legal efforts and general support necessary to protect their civil rights. In recent weeks, members of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and its supporters have demonstrated peacefully against the pipeline in a critical flashpoint in the fight for equality and their children's future. The article notes how the Standing Rock Sioux is a nation whose sovereignty rights pre-exist the founding of the United States, and this is very similar to the claim that has been reported on CVN previously by the Grand River Mohawks in Canada. The final piece of good news for the water protectors this week is that apparently a call has gone out, and there are military veterans who are planning to gather and stand for the protection of Standing Rock. An article on the Reverb Press website has reported that there's a planned deployment to Standing Rock scheduled for December 4th, but these men and women will be standing with the citizens protesting desperately to keep their lands and waters clean. These veterans believe that retiring their uniforms doesn't mean they are exempt from serving and protecting their country. They are outraged over the pipeline and further outraged over the treatment of the people trying to stop it. Wes Clark Jr. is the man behind the 3-day deployment of U.S. military veterans to the reservation. The standoff between the protectors and law continues to escalate, resulting in horrific injuries to protectors. Zach Cartwright of USUncut.com offered a little bit more, writing that between December 4th and 7th, veterans of various branches of the United States Armed Forces have scheduled a deployment to show solidarity and lend support to the Standing Rock Sioux. The event, called Veterans Stand for Standing Rock, already has 108 confirmed RSVPs on Facebook and features several high-profile progressive activists who have served in the military, including U.S. Representative Tulsi Gabbard, a Democrat from Hawaii, and Baltimore police officer turned police brutality whistleblower Michael A. Wood, Jr. The New Sun Unity website had an important message from Keeper of Sacred White Buffalo Calf Pipe. Selected excerpts from this message are as follows. I, Chief Arvol Looking Horse of the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota nations, ask you to understand an indigenous perspective on what has happened in America, what we call Turtle Island. We have been warned from ancient prophecies of these times we live in today, but we have also been given a very important message about a solution to these terrible times. There needs to be a fast move toward other forms of energy that are safe for all nations upon Mother Earth. In our prophecies, it is told we are now at the crossroads. Either unite spiritually as a global nation or be faced with chaos, disasters, diseases, and tears from our relatives' eyes. We are the only species that is destroying the source of life, meaning Mother Earth, in the name of power, mineral resources, and ownership of land, using chemicals and methods of warfare that are doing irreversible damage as Mother Earth is becoming tired and cannot sustain any more impacts of war. I ask you to join me in this endeavor. Our vision is for the peoples of all continents, regardless of their beliefs in the Creator, to come together as one at their sacred sites to pray and meditate and commune with one another, thus promoting an energy shift to heal our Mother Earth and achieve a universal consciousness toward attaining peace. As each day passes, I ask all nations to begin a global effort and remember to give thanks for the sacred food that has been gifted to us by our Mother Earth, so the nutritional energy of medicine can be guided to heal our minds and spirits. This new millennium will usher in an age of harmony, or it will bring an end of life as we know it. Starvation, war, and toxic waste have been the hallmark of the great myth of progress and development that ruled the last millennium. To us as caretakers of the heart of Mother Earth falls the responsibility of turning back the powers of destruction. You yourself are the one who must decide. You alone and only you can make this crucial choice to walk in honor or dishonor of Earth and your relatives. On your decision depends the fate of the entire world. Another message posted by Kent Nurburn and appears on his website shares his reflections about the events at Standing Rock. About the water protectors, Nurburn writes the following: "They are not there for themselves. They are there for our children and our children's children. They are the voice for the seventh generation, if there is to be a seventh generation. And they are being led by the very people whose voices have too long been silenced. The people who have always understood that the earth is alive and that spirit is present in all creation. The people of Native America. Those of us sitting comfortably in our homes and are called upon at this moment to decide if we will stand with them or if we will let this fade into the background while we continue to live as if Earth is infinite in her patience and capabilities. We are asked to choose by our words and actions whether we believe that the earth is here for our benefit and technology and ingenuity can always save us from our mistakes, or if we believe that we are stewards of this fragile planet and must approach her with humility and respect. As we choose, we would do well to keep the words of the elder who spoke with me close to our heart. There will come a day when things cannot be fixed, and it will be a day just like today." So what is Thanksgiving in the U.S. this year? For many, it will still be great shopping deals at stores. For others, it will be a holiday like any other where family will gather and probably forget the historical origins of this holiday and that it involved both white people and indigenous people. As I recently saw in a photo someone shared on the internet, Black Friday, because only in America people trample others for sales exactly one day after being thankful for what they already have. When we have finally removed the forces that have enslaved humanity and the planet, then a real reason to celebrate Thanksgiving can be observed, for it will then be in the spirit of oneness that we all share with each other, with all aspects of life, including our planet, and with all life that exists beyond this beautiful planet we call home. In other geopolitical news, we continue to take a look at the continuing collapse of the mainstream media institution in North America. CVN has reported recently on the massive failure of the North American media in its coverage of the U.S. election. We are now beginning to witness, perhaps more easily now, the interaction between political bodies, or perhaps more specifically, the unelected sources of those political entities, and the media in Europe. Leaders of the European Union are apparently trying to turn up the pressure on Russia once again by passing a resolution that effectively places Russia alongside the Daesh terror group as being a threat to the world. We have two reports from RT. The first report focuses on the EU betraying its own democratic principles, and the second has feedback from Jill Stein, former presidential candidate of the Green Party in the US, and a lawyer commentator who will be introduced.
Firstly, Sarah, the European Parliament has adopted a resolution seeking to counteract propaganda by third parties, which places Russia and ISIS on the same footing in terms of perceived informational threats. RT's correspondent Peter Oliver has been following the debate.
Well, the European Parliament has voted to pass this resolution. 304 MEPs agreeing with it, 179 against, and a whopping 208 abstaining. Interesting enough, though, if you put together those who voted against with those who abstained, it would have, of course, well exceeded the amount that voted in favour of it. Many people choosing to abstain, many MEPs thinking they didn't want a piece of this fight. But when the debate was on the Parliament floor in Strasbourg, it was certainly pretty venomous when it came to vitriol against Russia.
We are at war with Russia. We are on a collision course with each other, traveling faster than a jet fighter.
Russia has tried to damage the EU. The enemy is pushing his narrative hard.
The Kremlin wants to split Europe. It forces its information into our countries.
What the Russians and extremists don't like is freedom.
Russia and ISIS share the same aim. They're toxic.
But there was not too many people among the MEPs present in the debate on Tuesday evening that were on side with lumping together Islamic State, the terrorist organisation, with the sovereign nation of Russia.
It is a big mistake for the report to put on the same level and on the same side Russian media with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And I think this is very unjustified, it is wrong. Of course, it has nothing to do with reality. This means that the report is unjustified, it is not objective, and it is one-sided.
I think that in a pluralistic society and in a democratic society, we should not have any kind of fear of a real dissenting opinion and of different opinions. And I think that all the citizens should create their own position and their own ideas, listening to different voices. It seems that Europe, that is more and more weak, is trying to impose more than convince the opinion and the mind of our citizens and also of our neighbors.
Well, there has been a reaction from Moscow from this. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has described it as a degradation of democratic freedoms.
We see some clear political degradation of democracy as it's seen in Western society, here at the level of the European Parliament. I hope common sense will prevail and we will not see any restrictions. And as for those journalists who prompted an EU body to make such decisions, I want to congratulate them, as it appears they do their job actively, effectively and with talent.
And we've also heard from the RT editor-in-chief.
This is really outrageous. We are disappointed at how easily the European establishment gives away its own principles, the principles that we've been hearing for ages, for decades, the principles about which Russia has been lectured for years, for decades. And now we see that this holy principle of freedom of speech is not really needed and looks scary to Europeans themselves. This is very, very sad.
Now, reactions to the news are coming in from around the world. Friend of RT, former Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein spoke to us earlier. We asked her for her reaction to the EU Parliament resolution against Russian media. This is what Dr. Stein had to say. Take a listen.
I can speak to my experience here in the United States, where so many political dissidents like myself, who are basically locked out of our corporate media coverage, we look to RT. RT is what dissidents look to in this country to actually communicate. And I'll say, this is where the people who are really challenging power in this country unfortunately, we don't have a lot of options for being able to speak to the American public. So charging Russian TV with being a really dangerous ISIS-type threat, I don't get that.
All right, to talk more about this, joining me now is America's lawyer and Ring of Fire radio host Mike Papantonio. Mike, good of you to be with us today. So tell me, why do you think the EU Parliament is essentially aligning Russian media, including RT, on the same threat level as ISIS?
Well, it has to do with not just politics. I mean, you have the war hawks out there. They want to sell more weapons. They love the intrigue of another Cold War. Then you have corporate media. And in corporate media, part of that is mega corporations around the world. Now, think about this. Let me tell you what real propaganda is. If I call ABC or CBS or NBC and I say, will you please do a story about a drug that is killing thousands of women every day, and by the way, the drug is manufactured by Pfizer or Merck or whatever, some advertiser. They'll say, no, we can't do the story because our advertiser won't let us. That's what Jill Stein was just talking about. You can't get these stories out in corporate media. So now what we're seeing in the U.S., and I see it firsthand, the reaction to Russian television is, gee whiz, they're actually telling stories that we won't tell. And that's very bothersome to corporate media. It's very bothersome to Wall Street when you can go on the air and talk about a product like talc powder that may be causing cancer in women. Well, you can't get ABC or CBS to do a story on Johnson & Johnson. They pay millions of dollars every year in advertising. That is propaganda. And so this notion that, gee whiz, Russia's involved with propaganda, I've been a commentator on and off for RT for years. Not one time have I been asked to say anything other than what the truth of the story was. Not one time. But I've also done MSNBC, where I was told I could do no more stories because I talked about one of their advertisers and they got mad. That's the contrast here. So this isn't just about the crazy baby boomer war hawks or the crazy DNC that wants to blame Russia for everything. There's another side to this, and it has to do with corporate media and American corporations not liking what Russian television does, which is to tell stories that corporate media can't tell because their advertisers will not let them tell the story. They will say, if you tell the story, we're going to pull the ad money. And some cat on the 50th floor, some NBA guy, is making a decision that they can't tell the story.
Oh boy, well, you know, sometimes the truth hurts, Mike. And you know, a second ago you mentioned the Cold War. Do you feel that perhaps Western nations, the EU and the U.S. alike, are essentially becoming echo chambers of itself? Because all of this does sound like Cold War rhetoric, doesn't it?
Well, it is. We still have baby boomers around. Don't forget that. We still have baby boomers around. And if you talk to most baby boomers, they were all for invading Syria, invading Libya. They are a fearful type. And until the baby boomer Cold War types move through, we're going to have this ridiculous conversation. Millennials, they don't have issues like this. They understand we are a world economy. We're a world culture in many ways. It is the baby boomers that are causing this ridiculous conversation, and it just seems to be picking up. Frankly, I think the more we talk about it, the better it is, because you can shine a light on how ridiculous this whole thing really is.
But now that's happening here in the U.S., but now we're seeing that the EU is passing resolutions also calling RT, you know, this dangerous propaganda channel. How do you think the EU itself, the Parliament, how are they going to respond to, quote, countering Russian propaganda?
The point is this. Again, you follow that story. The woman who came forward with that proposal. Understand, look at her history. She was with the World Bank. She has all these connections to corporations all over Europe. There's always a money trail on something like this. Either the arms industry wants to sell more weapons, or our particular corporation wants to shut down a story that maybe RT did 2 years ago and doesn't want to hear it again. All of these things add up. You can't just look at the face of this and say, I understand it. You have to look at the backstory, and most of the time, the backstory is going to involve money.
Mike, last question for you is that a lot of non-Western media, RT included, has obviously been very critical of the role of the West in places like the Middle East and Libya. Is critical examination now becoming an existential threat to Western ideology? Real quickly.
Well, no, I mean, not at all, unless we make it that. I mean, we make it that if we buy into this crazy talk that we're hearing from the weapons industry and in this mega corporation voice that's out there saying Russia's bad for us.
A Zero Hedge article on November 23rd reported that the Sputnik news agency has already appealed to the UN, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and a number of international journalists, organizations, and NGOs, including Reporters Without Borders, to take measures to stop what it considers to be interference into freedom of speech in the EU. The resolution hits straight at a number of respected media, including Sputnik Agency, and has an aim to stop their activity in the EU. Moreover, the resolution bluntly contradicts the EU's own human rights and freedom of press norms, reads the letter signed by Sputnik Editor-in-Chief Margarita Simonvan. In the same article, reference was made to German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who has now begun her own campaign against alternative and social media news reporting. The article reported that Merkel warned on Wednesday against the power of fake news on social media to roil the establishment and to spur the rise of populists after launching her campaign for a fourth term. Speaking in Parliament for the first time since her announcement on Sunday that she would seek re-election next year, Merkel cautioned that public opinion was being manipulated on the Internet. A very misleading statement, for sure, since there is truth to what she is saying. From her perspective, the truth is that public opinion is being manipulated on the Internet, and it is, against her and against Western hegemony. From the perspective of the everyday person, there is also the truth that public opinion is being manipulated by the mainstream media to continue an agenda of enslavement and control over humanity. Who, therefore, is right? And what, therefore, is truth? As one begins to awaken, it becomes vital, and even essential, to ask your questions very carefully and in a way that prevents politicians or corporate leaders from responding in this manner. Merkel was quoted as saying the following: "Something has happened. As globalization has marched on, political debate is taking place in a completely new media environment. Opinions aren't formed the way they were 25 years ago. Today we have fake sites, bots, trolls, things that regenerate themselves, reinforcing opinions with certain algorithms, and we have to learn to deal with them." The Chancellor said the challenge for Democrats was to reach and inspire people. However, should that fail, Merkel essentially suggested the time for censorship has come. We must confront this phenomenon and, if necessary, regulate it. Yes, Ms. Merkel, something has changed. The people of the world are waking up to the lies. Yes, there are many fake websites and websites putting out deliberate disinformation. How is this any different from the mainstream media? The reason for this fresh attack on Russia may be due to the fact that the media and its elitist controllers are scared to death about the increased movement of countries in the EU back towards Russia and China. CVN reported last week on election results in both Bulgaria and Moldova, where the people elected presidents who are decidedly more pro-Russian than they are pro-US. Will Kirby, in a London Express article on November 21st, suggests that Brussels is facing a growing political crisis. The article reports that Eastern European countries are queuing up to develop closer ties with Russia after becoming increasingly disappointed with the cooperation from the European Union, according to reports. Two countries in particular, Moldova and Bulgaria, are reportedly seeing a big rise in the popularity of pro-Russian forces, and recent election results have provided more proof the countries look to ditch their European neighbors in favor of closer Russian ties. An Austrian newspaper quoted in the article tried to imply a negative tone towards Russia by writing, "In Moldova, dissatisfaction with the corrupt and divided pro-Western government is the main reason behind the longing for good old Soviet times." Could Italy also now be joining that list? According to a Reuters news service article on November 26th, a referendum over Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi's flagship constitutional reform will be held on December 4th, the government said on Monday, with the fate of his administration likely to hinge on the outcome. Renzi says the reform will bring much-needed political stability to Italy and has repeatedly pledged to resign if voters reject his proposals to reduce the role of the upper house, the Senate, and rein in the powers of regional governments. The reforms are being met with strong resistance as polling indicates the vote will be very close. The article continues, "The constitutional reform, which was approved by Parliament in April after almost 2 years of fierce debate, effectively abolishes the Senate as an elected chamber and prevents it from bringing down a government via a vote of no confidence. Under the current system, the upper and lower houses of Parliament have equal powers, and critics say this is one of the reasons why Italy has had 63 governments since World War II, with none of them strong enough to survive a full 5-year term. Should Renzi lose, and should he resign, this may open the door for yet another Russian-leaning candidate to take over the leadership of the country, possibly dealing yet another nail into the NATO coffin. France is another country looking to put its nail into the NATO coffin as well. Will Kirby of the London Express reported on the 21st, a series of bombshell surveys has suggested that the Front National chief will wallop all of the conservative candidates in the first round of the race to become the next president of France. Eurosceptic Ms. Le Pen, who has vowed to lead the country out of the EU, scored between 4 and 9% higher than either of the two center-right politicians she is expected to battle for the keys to Élysée Palace. All of these may be hints at an explanation as to why the unelected EU leadership decided on its resolution against Russia, as reported at the beginning of this newscast. In financial news, those who are following the financial shifts at this time may be observing this week's report coming out that the US dollar is surging relative to other global currencies. Over the past year or so, CVN has been reporting on what is the likely reason for this surge in the US dollar, given the fact that so many countries are beginning to pivot away from US hegemony and towards the growing Eastern Economic Alliance of countries led by the BRICS. While the Western leadership and business pundits would have Westerners believe that a strong US dollar and a weakening Asian currency or currencies might be a good thing for the US, this would seem to be an illusion. The fractional reserve system of banking is dependent upon debt, and this debt has now become unmanageable, and as a result, the current global economy, the one we have long known and been enslaved to, is in the process of imploding. It has to. Mathematically, there is no way the current system could continue on forever. We are witnessing the end of the fiat currency fractional reserve system of banking. Had the world understood the truth of this system 2 decades ago or longer, we would not have had to go through the more painful transition that we are now going through. However, it is what it is, and now the options are to either continue living in the illusion and get consumed with fear over the evolving global economy, or, in the case of Iceland, swallow the bitter pill and move forward in co-creating something better. Moving forward also means having an understanding of why this move forward is necessary. Current geopolitical and geoeconomic systems are no longer serving humanity nor the planet. The shifting vibrations and shifting consciousness are revealing more and more an informed population that no longer chooses to live as slaves to criminally fraudulent systems of banking and commercial law. This week, an article appearing on the Reuters website on November 25th has reported that the U.S. dollar's renewed surge and signs that it will build on current 14-year highs are leaving a trail of destruction through world currency markets and forcing policymakers to rethink mechanisms to deal with the fallout. Currencies from the Indian rupee to the offshore version of the Chinese yuan have hit record lows to the greenback this week, and if history is a guide, another year or two of pain lies ahead for them. The list of dollar victims is growing, and economists and policymakers are starting to wonder whether the dollar's surge could derail the very recovery in demand and inflation that would drive it higher. Emerging markets are vulnerable. Here is what I personally interpret from this article, and I do not ask people to agree or share this opinion, at least until one has done more research on this particular topic. The surge in the U.S. dollar, as I've stated before, is related to an increasing sell-off of U.S. Treasury debt bonds, particularly in Asia, as Eastern countries that have traditionally been buying up debt to keep the U.S. economy stable have now apparently decided that the U.S. dollar is no longer desirable as a global reserve currency. As the world wakes up to the illusion of money created out of thin air and the policies of the U.S. Fed and the Rothschilds' central banking system, more countries are beginning to look for ways to get out from under the control of this system. The BRICS alliance, led by Russia and China, appear to be offering that alternative solution that countries are beginning to move towards, and this would explain why Western puppet leaders, media, and business pundits are keen to demonize both Russia and China. Russia is demeaned as a military threat, while China is positioned as a so-called weak economy. This is, of course, relative to the Western paradigm and does not reflect the fact that China's currency is now gold-backed and why China is now beginning to exert greater influence in the gold market and also with the International Monetary Fund, now that its currency, the yuan, has been included in the basket of international currencies known as Special Drawing Rights, or SDR. The two currencies specifically mentioned by Reuters in their article are both part of the BRICS alliance, and this may reflect the shift away from U.S. hegemony, and the global banking cabal may be attempting to position any country moving away from the U.S. in a more negative way. The article is claiming that these currencies are victims, and one has to wonder if this is really the case. For those who may wonder why I feel the U.S. dollar surge is related to a sell-off of U.S. Treasury debt, there is another article from Reuters going back to December of 2014. In this article, Reuters reported on the fluctuation of the Russian ruble, writing that the Russian currency has swung wildly in recent weeks after the central bank floated the currency and panic gripped the market, threatening to shatter the economic prosperity on which President Putin's popularity partly rests. We think that state companies were explicitly recommended to sell foreign currency today so that the ruble ends the year on a beautiful note, said Vladimir Miklaszewski, a trading desk strategist at Deutsche Bank. The key part of that was the comment about companies being explicitly recommended to sell foreign currency. Now keep in mind that article was from December of 2014, and at that time everyone believed that the Russian economy was going to collapse, and now here we are a year later, or 2 years later rather, and the Russian economy has not collapsed the way pundits had been predicting. When the Western media reports that certain currencies are doing poorly, they are trying to send a mixed message. Observe an article appearing on the Zero Hedge website on November 25th. This article writes the following: "The dollar has been so strong since the election that it's clouding the vision of all U.S.-centric observers. Any market decision requires an accurate assessment of the state of play. So apart from the roaring greenback, what are the other themes? First thing to clear up is that most Asian emerging market currencies are doing well. The Indian rupee is at a record low? Rubbish, writes the article. That's only versus the dollar. The rupee is an outperformer since the election and has rallied 5% on a trade-weighted basis since its year-to-date low in June. Having said this, I am observant of another financial situation occurring in India that allegedly involves the removal of certain financial notes from their banking system. I am not knowledgeable enough yet to report on this, but my suspicion is that there is a much deeper story to this than merely the chaos that certain media are trying to report. I am not going to focus on this at this time, however. With the world so massively in debt, the only way to deal with it is to print more money, which is basically legalized counterfeiting, and it is a process that devalues the currency doing it. With the world no longer playing the debt game, some countries have now been able to successfully create an option for other countries to choose instead of remaining enslaved to the fractional reserve model. When countries sell off U.S. debt bonds, the U.S. has to buy them back. The question may then be asked where the money is coming from to be able to do this. This is part of the lie and fraud that has been perpetrated upon humanity. CVN has reported on the past about a little-known part of the U.S. Treasury called the Exchange Stabilization Fund. According to the U.S. Treasury website, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, or ESF, consists of three types of assets: U.S. dollars, foreign currencies, and special drawing rights, SDRs, which is an international reserve asset created by the IMF. The ESF can be used to purchase or sell foreign currencies, to hold U.S. foreign exchange and SDR assets, and to provide financing to foreign governments. I emphasize that. Reading between the lines, one might be pretty close to the truth if one thought that money for financing to foreign governments is merely the vehicle by which the U.S. Fed has bought and corrupted governments around the world. Where things get a bit more cloudy and perhaps even a bit suspicious is this next paragraph. The legal basis of the ESF is the Gold Reserve Act of 1934. As amended in the late 1970s, the Act provides in part that the Department of the Treasury has a stabilization fund, consistent with the obligations of the government in the International Monetary Fund, on orderly exchange arrangements and an orderly system of exchange rates. The Secretary, with the approval of the President, may deal in gold, foreign exchange, and other instruments of credit and securities. The fund deals with gold, and yet the U.S. government removed the gold standard for the U.S. in 1970. It has been alleged that the initial money for this fund came from the confiscation of private gold in the U.S., and it is also used to buy all the treasury bonds that are sold by foreign countries in order to keep the U.S. dollar artificially strong. What is happening is that the U.S. dollar is hyperinflating, and this is what is being reported to the world as a strong U.S. dollar. The weakening of other currencies relative to the U.S. dollar may be tied to the fact that certain currencies are beginning to move towards a gold standard to join the Chinese yuan as part of the new financial paradigm. The movement of countries towards the East is being reflected in both geopolitical and geoeconomical events happening around the world right now. They are not separate from each other. They are very much interconnected, and this is what Western leaders and media are not sharing with the world. Starting next week, I expect to begin a 5-part series on exposing this little-known entity and what is behind it. I'm referring, of course, to the ESF. From what I have been able to discern over the first few minutes of the first videos I've seen, I think many of you will not be disappointed with what you hear. It is a series of videos from almost 5 years ago, but appear to be well-researched from what I've heard so far. An article on Zero Hedge from January 1st of 2012 quoted the individual who produced the videos, and he explains why it is important for people to watch them. He said, It is impossible to understand the world today without knowing what the Exchange Stabilization Fund is and what it has been doing. Officially in charge of defending the dollar, the ESF is the government agency which controls the New York Fed, runs the CIA's black budget, and is the architect of the world's monetary system, the IMF, World Bank, and so on. The ESF financing, through the OSS and then the CIA, built up the worldwide propaganda network, which has so badly distorted history today, including erasing awareness of its existence from popular consciousness. It has been directly involved in virtually every major U.S. fraud scandal since its creation in 1934. The London gold pool, the Kennedy assassinations, Iran-Contra, CIA drug trafficking, HIV, and worse. Stay tuned next week for more information on this. For those who are looking for the information, they will know that a massive change is coming on multiple levels in our physical world, but also in our human and planetary consciousness, as I have stated many times. Zero Hedge, in an article on November 20th, points to former high-level bankers who are now stepping out to say that this transition is coming, although I am describing it more gently. According to this article, in a recent interview with Swiss Sonntagsblick, titled appropriately enough, "A Recession is Sometimes Necessary," the former CEO of UBS and Credit Suisse, Oswald Grübel, lashed out by criticizing the growing strength of central banks and their supremacy over the markets and other banks. The former chief executive officer claimed that the use of negative interest rates and huge positive balance sheets represent weapons of mass destruction. He calls for an end to the use of negative interest rates. The article continues, worse, he warned that central banks will eventually lose their credibility in the markets, but that this could take 10 years or more, at which point it will all end in a crash. What happens then? The former CEO believes that the final outcome will be wholesale financial nationalization. After that, all banks could belong to the state. Nationalizing banks, given the current economic paradigm, would be a good thing. If I use the Bank of Canada as an example, before 1974, Canada had a fantastic economy and things were going really well. The Bank of Canada would issue whatever funding was necessary to the Canadian government, interest-free. The moment the Bank of Canada was sold out to the central banking cartel, everything changed in 74, and Canada was plunged into a very poor economy, multiplied by false debt created out of thin air by these international central bankers. For the Canadian listeners, by the way, and any who may be interested, another court case is coming up in early December against the Canadian government for its sell-off of the Bank of Canada, and I am expecting to have a little bit more news to share on this topic within the coming weeks. Coming back to Grübel, the article also notes that the former CEO also touched on a point we have made ever since 2010, when we said that in a world of unprecedented political polarity, politicians now control the world almost exclusively through monetary policy, to wit. After the financial crisis, politics has taken power in the banking sector. It has bound the banks into a regulatory corset, and now they can no longer move. Politicians have told central banks, now you determine what is going on with the economy. What are the implications of this power shift? Previously, the risk was distributed to thousands of banks. They had to pay for their mistakes. The risk lay with the shareholders. Today, more and more, the state carries the risk, which, of course, is another word for taxpayers. In other words, the next crash will be one where central, not commercial banks are failing, and the one left with the bill will once again be the ordinary person in the street. Grübel offers an interesting response when asked if being a billionaire is considered being rich, to which he replies, no, money has little to do with wealth. The real rich are carefree. Those who are healthy are not dependent. The greatest wealth is independence. No wonder then why the pharmaceutical industry and medical profession seeks to keep people as sick as possible. They will continue to be dependent upon others. The article closes with another statement from Grubel. A recession is sometimes necessary to abolish old structures and to bring renewal. Alas, this critical point remains lost on virtually everyone in a position of control, and as a result, the delay assures that the day of reckoning will be far worse. Those desperately trying to hang on to the old financial paradigm may find things becoming increasingly more challenging and perhaps even scary. It will be disastrous for those who are part of the global cabal, and it will be quite painful for those who feel their lives are dependent upon the current financial paradigm. Yes, there will possibly be a rough transition period, but the more we are able to accept what now must happen and be willing to go with the flow, we must also be able to look out for others while working together with others to get through the transition. The better it will be for all. A sign that the global banking cabal is losing its sphere of control over other countries is the fact that countries are beginning to take actions they may not have considered taking before due to fear of what the U.S. would do to them. Former economic hitman John Perkins speaks regularly to this, pointing out that one of his former jobs was to threaten the leadership of countries to deregulate their banking system so private banks could get control of the country. Upon deregulation, governments are then forced to bail out the national banks, and thus the IMF or US-controlled World Bank would be called in to provide those loans. These loan agreements were often done secretively between central bankers and government finance ministers that would go against national sovereignty and thus force governments to adopt austerity policies that harm workers, their families, and ultimately the planet. Geopolitically, we have begun seeing signs of countries beginning to break away from the US and lean towards Russia, most recently Bulgaria and Moldova, a move that no doubt has the US and NATO very concerned. Financially this week, an article appearing on the mintpressnews.com website on November 18th is reporting a shift in Bolivia. According to the article, before Evo Morales assumed the office of president, Bolivia was suffering from the effects of IMF World Bank imposed austerity and privatization that exploited its people and resources. It was also South America's poorest nation. Though the Bolivian people, through strong showings of popular resistance over a period of years, were able to stop some of the worst privatization efforts, particularly the privatization of the nation's water supply. Many of the shackles imposed by these Rothschilds-controlled institutions remained. Morales, who became Bolivia's 80th president in 2006, was the first president to come from Bolivia's majority indigenous Aymara population and has since focused on poverty reduction and combating the influence of the United States and multinational corporations in Bolivia. 10 years later, Morales, a democratic socialist, has managed to transform Bolivia into the fastest-growing South American economy, all while maintaining a balanced budget and slashing its once crippling government debt. Bolivia's newfound economic independence has now empowered Morales to reject the very same institutions that once preyed upon his country. Just a few weeks ago, Morales announced that Bolivia will no longer respond to the demands or blackmail of the United States, the World Bank, or the IMF. Even more positive than this, the article adds that Bolivia has done much more under Morales' leadership than ban international banking cartels from operating within its borders. Bolivia has kicked out numerous multinational corporations since Morales took office, including McDonald's and Coca-Cola, while also refusing to cooperate with the U.S.'s disastrous war on drugs. It also devotes 14% of its national budget to education, the second most of any country in South America. Morales is quoted in the article as saying that, before, in order to obtain credit from the IMF, we were forced to give up a part of our country. but we have liberated ourselves economically and politically, and we are no longer dependent on other countries or institutions. This is an extremely good case of positive change that can empower people in a country and move a national government to stand up against the global cabal and corporate corruption. The article closes with the following. Morales also forced foreign oil and gas companies to pay an astounding 82% of its profits to the Bolivian government, which is used to fund a variety of popular social programs benefiting the poor. Poverty in Bolivia has dropped significantly as a result. Bolivia's transformation under Morales proves that any nation, no matter how impoverished, can throw off the shackles imposed by international bankers and return the power to the people. In disclosure-related news, CVN has been reporting on attempts made by musician Tom DeLonge to allegedly help get the ET issue brought into the mainstream public. As well, this newscast has been covering comments made by Paradigm Research Group Director Stephen Bassett about how Obama could be the disclosure president and how Hillary Clinton could help with this. With the election results as they are, Clinton's political career is finished. Recently, Bassett gave an interview to a well-known UFO reporter, Jaime Maussan from Mexico. In a few excerpts from this interview, Bassett comments on what he believes was the original plan and how things have shifted with the current election results, and how this could become a win-win-win for everyone involved.
A very interesting situation has developed. Clearly, all the statements by Secretary Clinton, President Obama, John Podesta, going back to April of 2014, one after another regarding the ET issue, though they didn't go as far as they could have. Unprecedented. It's never happened before in American politics. Meanwhile, over the last 2 years, nearly 1,000 articles have been written around the world, English and foreign press, about the Clinton-ET connection. It's out. And of course, you know, the internet version of the articles have links to the Rockefeller Initiative documents and videos and so forth. So it's fully out there. They're on the record, and she's going toward the White House. Fantastic. If she wins the election, we then really put more pressure on her, all of these comments, and then if she goes to the White House, now we really put pressure on her to follow up. And I happen to believe that the plan all along was for her to win the White House and be the disclosure president. But that didn't happen, all right? So she loses the election, and we have a whole different kind of person. So what is happening is it's clear that something is going on at the Pentagon. First, about 16 months ago, roughly, the Pentagon approached a known musician in the United States named Tom DeLonge. Tom was founded the Blink-182 group and another group. They sold tens of millions of records. He's been interested in the field since the early 1990s. So they reached out to him. He said that the Pentagon contacted, said, we want to talk to you. He goes in, they talk. He's talking to high-level people there, and they're saying, you know, we want to see if you can help get information out to the people about the ET issue. And they talked projects. One of the projects was a series of fictional books that contain maybe the truth. They also wanted a documentary. He's going to do a documentary. The first book is already out, Secret Machines. It's selling. And then they provided him a 10-person advisory team to help give him this information. Now, a lot of people said, forget it. This guy's making this up. This is just a marketing ploy, sell a lot of books. Well, I looked into it, and it sounded legitimate. Then WikiLeaks started releasing John Podesta's emails, the campaign chairman for Secretary Clinton. And in those emails is correspondence back and forth between Tom DeLonge and John Podesta, setting up meetings, trying to arrange him to meet a top Pentagon official, a top scientist. It's all right there. And eventually they have a documentary meeting. They interview Podesta. He says interesting things. So there is literally a Pentagon engagement going over here. Meanwhile, I just got a text from an inside person, Pentagon, that I know to be legitimate. This doesn't happen to me very often, all right? And I happen to have Signal text on my phone. Signal is the text encryptor, the one that Snowden recommends, that allows you to speak text to text with somebody if they have Signal encrypted. Now, I normally don't ever do this, but a friend asked me to do it. I get a text message. What is the message? The message was simple. No questions and answers. The message was simple. There are a number of people now working on the ET issue inside the military intelligence community, including the Pentagon, that are ready to cooperate with the top people like the Secretary of Defense and get this issue out, end the truth embargo under President Obama. Right? They're ready to do this, meaning they can't come forward. But if, say, Hillary Clinton were to give a more extensive interview to a top journalist like, say, Maureen Dowd and start really talking about the Rockefeller Initiative, there are a lot of journalists that will jump right in. It will grow very quickly, and now you've got hundreds of journalists going to the Pentagon with a lot of questions the Pentagon doesn't want to answer, in which case the Pentagon is now motivated to say, look, let's get a deal with the White House so we can get this done. But Secretary of Defense is probably not in on some of these special access programs. I don't think even the Secretary of Defense is now told about the ET issue. So the Secretary of Defense would have to turn into his agency and looking down and go, who can help me here? And the message we're getting is there are plenty of people ready to cooperate. So now they cooperate. He gets what the president needs. They have a meeting, and the president can go and announce the extraterrestrial presence without raising this issue of the breach that's been in existence for some time between the military intelligence complex and the White House, which is, by the way, a constitutional breach. Everybody wins, and it gets done under Obama. Why is this important? Because they know Obama. He's been there for some time. He's stable. The people that are in power, the people that have been in the agencies have been there. A lot of them are going to be gone in 768 days. And so it's a lot safer to do it under Obama. All right, get this done. And then after the country calms down, after they've learned ETs are here, some structure will be put in place so that when the new president, who doesn't have a lot of experience with national security and extraterrestrials, frankly, when he comes in, he will have some structure there. It will be a more orderly process. But Obama will be the disclosure president. Now, why would Hillary Clinton speak out and start this process? Because her political career is over. She's done. She's never going to be the president. She's never going to be the first woman president. But she still can make a huge mark on history by simply telling the truth, a more established truth about the whole connection that she had with this issue and why she's speaking out, why Podesta's speaking out, so the media can get really going. It's in her hands. If she acts soon, then Obama will be the disclosure president. That is what is underway. And not just, in the activist community. It's clear the Pentagon is actually getting involved here and trying to demonstrate that they're ready too. Now that is new. And so we've already had one piece of history made. We have an outsider as president. We may have another extraordinary piece of history made if Obama is able to finally be the disclosure president. And then we will be in the post-disclosure world. Now, the Democrats will get a huge legacy. The Clintons get a legacy. Obama, of course, gets a legacy. But to be fair to the Republicans, Donald Trump will be the first post-disclosure president. And his presidency will have a lot to say about how the post-disclosure world is going to be, how would you say, designed. And that's a pretty big deal. And so in a way, everybody wins. But if we don't get this done, if Secretary Clinton remains silent, and somehow disclosure doesn't happen, then it passes over into this new presidency. A lot of uncertainties. It could be chaotic. And the disclosure event, which could be forced by other countries, there are other countries that could make the announcement, it's just not good for us. It's not good for the country. It's bad national security. And so all logic says it's time to get it done, and PRG is working with 35 reporters, directly with 35 reporters, who have already written on this subject. Some of them 3 or 4 articles. One of them is a Nobel Prize winner. These reporters are ready to write even more articles, and more articles are coming.
The link to the full interview will appear in the show summary for this story. Over to science-related news now, and this week a video has surfaced that seems to validate all those who feel or believe that the global warming, climate change story being told by Western leaders and media is a hoax. I cannot ask anyone to agree with me, and listeners over the last few weeks have heard me make my arguments about why I do not believe the story that they are selling, even though I do know that the climate of our planet is changing. I just do not accept their version of why it is happening and their continued theft of money from the taxpayers to fund this lie. I have stated in the past the necessity for carbon dioxide because it is what plants and trees breathe, and when they exhale, they produce oxygen. If anything, an overabundance of CO2 is good for plants, trees, and the like. The problem comes when the logging industry destroys the very source that absorbs carbon dioxide. Leaders claim that there is too much CO2 because of burning fossil fuels, and yet they do nothing about the logging industry or the polluting of oceans. Assuming their argument is true for a moment, they also do nothing to begin the mass production of hemp, which would not only absorb massive amounts of CO2, while also creating tens of millions of new jobs worldwide in green industries using hemp in so many different ways. Therefore, my argument is that even if there is truth to what they say, their actions suggest something completely different, and it is merely a ruse to scam more money from taxpayers. However, maybe my reasoning is not enough to get people to reflect more on what I personally feel is a scam and hoax. Perhaps another perspective may offer some more information. A video has crossed my path from early March of 2013, and it contains an address given by Professor Ian Plimer, a geologist and author of Heaven and Earth, Global Warming, The Missing Science, is from Australia, and in the video it is stated that he is speaking to the UK government. Whether this is the Parliament or perhaps just a parliamentary committee is unclear, although it is more likely a committee. He shares his views on the global warming issue based on his expertise as a geological scientist. Observe especially his comments about ice not always being on the planet, and there was a period of time when the entire global climate was temperate and life thrived with high levels of CO2.
I'm a geologist, and the one thing that we miss out on in looking at climate change is the past. Climates have always changed. Climate changes in the past have been greater and faster than anything we experience in our lifetime. And sea levels have always changed. Not by the modest couple of millimetres that people are having conniptions about, but we've had in the past sea level changes of only 1,500 metres. That's a sea level change. And if we look back in the history of time, the atmosphere once had a very large amount of carbon dioxide in it. It's now got less than 0.04%. Where did that carbon dioxide go to? It went into chalk, limestone, shells and life. And we've been sequestering carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere for only 2,500 million years. This planet has been degassing carbon dioxide since it first formed on that Thursday 4,567 million years ago. Carbon dioxide is a natural gas. It has dominated the atmosphere for an extraordinarily long period of time, and we now are at a dangerously low level. If we halved the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, we would have no terrestrial plants. Carbon dioxide is plant food. It is not a pollutant. To use words like pollution with carbon dioxide is misleading and deceptive. But the past gives us a wonderful story. In the past, we've had 6 major ice ages. We are currently in an ice age. It started 34 million years ago when South America had the good sense to pull away from Antarctica, and there was a circumpolar current set up which isolated Antarctica, and we started to get the Antarctic ice sheet. We've had periods of glaciation and interglacials. We are currently in interglacial. And during that 34 million years, we have refrigerated the Earth. But for less than 20% of time, we have had ice on planet Earth. The rest of the time, it's been warmer and wetter. And there's been more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And what did life do? It thrived. 6 of the 6 great ice ages were initiated when the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere was higher than now. In fact, up to 1,000 times higher. So we have from the geological evidence absolutely no evidence that carbon dioxide has driven climate. For some odd reason, the major driver of climate is that great ball of heat in the sky, which we call the sun. You heard it here first. It's really quite unusual. And we change our distance from the sun. Every 100,000 years our orbit changes from elliptical to circular. And we have a cycle of 90,000 years of cold and 10,000 years of warm. We're in one of those warm cycles now. And every 43,000 years the axis of the Earth changes a little bit. And every 21,000 years we get a bit of a wobble. Each of those orbital events puts us further from the sun. Every now and then we get bombarded by cosmic rays coming from a supernova eruption somewhere out there. And if the sun's magnetic field cannot drive these away, we start to form low-level clouds. We've got extremely good evidence that this process has been going on for a very long period of time. Every now and then continents start to move, and they move at very rapid rates. At one time a continent can be over a pole, at another time it can be at the equator. Those moving continents change the major heat balance on the Earth, and that's the ocean currents. The oceans carry far more heat than the atmosphere. Every now and then, because of major geological processes, we'll get a great bulge on the ocean floor of new volcanic rock. That changes ocean currents. Every year we have 10,000 cubic kilometres of seawater that goes through new volcanic rocks in the ocean floor. That exchanges heat. The reaction between seawater and the rocks stops the oceans becoming acid. When we run out of rocks, the oceans will become acid, but don't wait up. It will be a long time. We see 1,500 terrestrial volcanoes on planet Earth. We only measure 20 of them, and very few of those measurements are really accurate, but they tell us that a little bit of carbon dioxide leaks out of those volcanoes. But what we don't hear is that there are at least 3.47 million volcanoes on the sea floor which leak out huge amounts of carbon dioxide. We have got pools of liquid carbon dioxide on the sea floor. So, early Earth's carbon dioxide, where did it go? It went into rocks. Where did it come from? It came from rocks. What did it do to the planet? We did not fry and die. We didn't have runaway greenhouse. Well, that's just geology. That's not important. So let's look at more modern times. In more modern times, we have drill cores that have gone through the ice sheets. Snow, when it falls, captures some air. That air is then trapped in the ice. We can later extract it from drill core and measure the amount of carbon dioxide in the air. And we can see with our cycles of glaciation and interglacials that when we finish an interglacial event, then we release carbon dioxide some 800 years later. What's that telling us? It's telling us that temperature is driving carbon dioxide, not that carbon dioxide is driving temperature. Oh yes, but that's only hundreds of thousands of years ago. Forget that. Well, let's go to more modern times. We've been measuring temperature accurately since 1850, and the accuracy is plus or minus 1 degree Celsius for those ancient measurements. We are being told that this 0.7 degrees Celsius rise is going to create a disaster. I've only got to move over to here, and I've had a 0.7 degree Celsius temperature rise. Where do you people go for your summer holidays? You go to a warmer climate. If someone from Helsinki moves to Singapore, there's an average temperature rise of 22 degrees Celsius. Singaporeans don't drop dead in the streets from the temperature. So we are creatures of warm climates, and we've been measuring temperature, and we have seen a slight warming from 1860 to 1890, and then a slight slight cooling until 1910, then a warming until 1940, so much so that the Northwest Passage was open, then a cooling until 1977, and then a warming until the end of the century, and now we're in a period of cooling. So we've had these cycles of warming and cooling. Strange that these cycles are actually related to changes in the heat balance in the oceans. So we have these 60-year cycles over a long warming event. We are in a period of global warming. It has been warming since the Maunder minimum 330 years ago. These were the times when you had the ice fairs on the Thames. These are the times when the Dutch masters painted hoarfrosts and bitterly cold conditions. That was the time when the sun was a bit inactive and we had no sunspot activity. So we're in a long period of warming, and one of the questions that I ask in this book is which part of the last 330 years of warming is due to human activity and which part is natural? These are questions that kids should ask their school teachers, and they're deliberately unanswerable questions, because I am of the view that many children are getting fed environmental propaganda in the schools and are not being given the critical and analytical facilities to be able to dissect an argument. So we're in a period of warming. What's the worry? It's quite normal. I believe we've had an enormous corruption of science and the scientific method. I believe that the monies that are floating around for climate research, which is a current fad and fashion, are quite perverse. I believe we're putting science backwards, and come the next inevitable pandemic, we may not have the weapons to handle it. We might go waving herbs and chanting rather than creating an antidote. So this, for me, this climate industry has been a huge attack on the scientific method. It has been an attack on my science and history. Things, fortunately, are changing.
So the global cabal, perhaps knowing that CO2 would cause the planetary consciousness to thrive, chose to demonize it in the same way they are demonizing everything else these days. Create a scare about it and then get taxpayers to pay for it all, and they just keep it all for themselves. Anyone who exposes this or speaks up against it will be branded a denier, or worse, an eco-terrorist, and perhaps even the worst of all, a terrorist along the same levels as those in Daesh, also known as the Islamic State. It matters not what I may personally think, for it is ultimately up to each individual to decide for oneself what is true for her or him in this current moment of now. Finally, in health-related news, I hope to be sharing more information with you over the next couple of weeks from the health spa that I am currently staying at. Already, I have picked up a fair bit of information, and I have now begun my fasting, cleansing, detox program. The routine that I have to go through has made it more challenging than usual to prepare the newscast, and this is one of the reasons it was later in getting posted. 2 individuals I have met who are offering services at this particular location are extremely knowledgeable, and I hope to be able to share with you some of their information. I will be explaining a bit more about the particular process that I'm going through and what I may be experiencing personally. What I can say is this. For years, I kept saying to myself that when I have a bit of money, I will go to a health spa and treat myself. We have to let go of this. I was given an opportunity, thanks to my mother, to come back and focus on what is most important at this time, myself. If you have been on an airplane, you will recall how flight attendants ask you to put your oxygen mask on first and then help those around you. This is so you do not pass out or die while trying to help others before yourself. Spiritually, you have to take care of yourself. After only a few days here, I can already see how badly out of alignment I have been. How can I help the world if I am not ready and willing to help myself? At this time, given the energy shifts and given the possibility that there will be some kind of global currency reset, I can only highly recommend that if you are able to borrow a certain amount of money and go treat yourselves at a health spa like this with a good cleansing program, I would suggest you take advantage of it. The one health spa in Thailand I tested many years ago when I worked for a multinational company out of Sweden was quite good, and I will be staying there a little later. The place where I am now, also in Thailand, on Koh Samui, has a very good and quite intensive cleansing and fasting program that I have now started. I believe I can guarantee and promise that you will be blown away by what you learn about your body in this process. I realize, of course, that not everyone will be able to borrow money to do this. I would love to be able to fund a trip of this nature for those who are ready to make massive change in their world and in their service to humanity and the planet. It is my creation that someday this will be a possibility. If, however, you happen to be one who might be able to do something like this, I will be sharing information that may help you to make a final decision. What you can receive at a health spa over here in 2 weeks, you would never get at a health spa in the Western world. It may seem expensive to travel here, but if you look for the off-season prices, perhaps starting next March or April, you will find something cheaper. If you are willing to travel a bit longer, you can investigate more unusual connections. For example, I was able to get a $600 Canadian ticket from Toronto to Stockholm on WOW Airlines from Iceland, a low-cost airline. I then got an $800 Canadian ticket from Stockholm to Koh Samui, a flight that is over 9 hours long, and it was a return ticket. If you are willing to do a bit of research, there are travel deals out there. Learn about the low-cost airlines that are out there. For people from the U.S., one may consider flying to Lisbon and then getting a low-cost trip across Europe and then another scheduled carrier to the final destination. I cannot tell you what is right for you. All I can share is how important it is now to look after you. Put your oxygen mask on so you can continue in your valuable service to humanity and the planet at this time. I speak for myself, but I know that this applies to many listeners also. I had to stop putting everyone and everything ahead of my health. My ego kept telling me that something else was more important, and I'll take care of myself later when I can. Meanwhile, as I am now discovering, I am seeing what I have done to my body and my health. Stay tuned. I will try to share as much as I can. Please understand that I do not know how I'm going to react as I move further along my cleansing and healing, so the newscast may follow a bit of an erratic schedule over the coming weeks. I thank you for your patience, and I do hope that a number of you will find something meaningful in what I offer from this information and choose to act upon it. Here is one quick example of what I have learned so far. As part of my program, I receive a 1-hour massage a day. One woman seemed to be very intuitive because she found many energetic blocks in my body. Right now, I am very energetically blocked in the hips and lower back. This is the emotional center of the body. I have been feeling a lot of discomfort for a long time, and it has been hard to sit down for long periods of time and sleep during the night. I've had a few wonderful souls enter my world and offer a few different healing modalities to try, but I was unable to make the breakthrough at that moment. Maybe it wasn't my time at that moment, or maybe it was my ego trying to block me, or maybe it was the possibility that this modality of healing was not the right one for me personally. I am staying open to all possibilities. An article appearing on the ForensicHealing.com website offers a demonstration of one modality of healing called forensic healing. For those with emotional issues, there is a video offering a demonstration that some may find meaningful. As well, CVN has featured another individual, George Duzman, who works with a modified form of emotional freedom technique, or EFT. George has modified this technique and has been working with numerous individuals, even some listeners from this newscast who have had some incredible breakthroughs working with him. Even a very dear friend of mine is experiencing some amazing things working with George right now. I can personally say that George is one of the most giving people. He loves to work with people, and he serves in much the same way as I do. He does not charge for his services that he offers. His goal is to help. There are a number of links I will add in the show summary with some demonstrations of his work and an interview he did with Cosmic Contacts Radio with Pam Drinnan. If you feel it could be good for you, I highly encourage you to reach out to him. Tell him you heard about him from CVN, and I would appreciate that very much. If you are unable to go to a health spa, perhaps one or both of these techniques may be meaningful to help you achieve any breakthroughs you are manifesting at this time. Just a quick announcement this week. Last week I mentioned that Donald Trump was alleged to have made a comment about running for president as a Republican because, according to the alleged quote, Republicans are too stupid and that Trump could say anything and win. Although there may be a few people who will say that it ended up being true given the current results, I have been informed by a listener, HK, who told me that Trump did not make such a quote. If this listener's information is correct, then I apologize for the error. Thanks to HK for sharing that. In this week's final words, I was chatting recently with a friend of mine who is trained in shamanic work. She wrote something to me that I think I have known for a very long time because it felt right to us both. In her words, I have come to the conclusion that the only right side of history right now is the earth. We are either with her or against her. And this is a message that was reflected in the Indigenous message at Standing Rock that we heard earlier in the newscast. It has been for this reason that you have heard me say on this newscast, for the highest good of humanity and our planet. I have chosen these words carefully, for they reflect what I feel is key. Humanity cannot survive, at least in its current physical form, without the system of life we know as our planet Earth. There are humans who, of course, do not care about other humans, nor the planet. There are humans who care about humans, but give no consideration to the planet. There may even be some who care about the planet, but do not particularly care about humans. I do not necessarily mean that in a negative way. There may very well be some kind of compassionate hermits living somewhere, honoring the planet, but choosing not to interact with humanity. However, if humanity is to continue moving forward in positive evolution to a higher consciousness form of existence, it is pretty clear that humans must have a different and healthier relation with the planet that sustains us. Those who have seen, and in my personal opinion, truly understood the deeper message of the movie Avatar will be able to understand that the planet in that movie, the destruction put upon that planet, and how the planet ultimately came to the rescue of the indigenous population because a human had the ability to see what the planet and its population with its traditions represented, and he was able to ask for help through the tree of life to send a prayer of help. This help came in the form of animals and of a uniting of the various groups of civilizations across that planet. Is this not what we are witnessing upon our planet at this time? The global cabal is seeking to destroy the planet for its personal gain, for profit, and for power. Somewhere, either a call for help has gone out. For now, we are beginning to witness the rising up of people around the world and the uniting of souls in ways that have the potential to shift how things will play out in the coming moments of now. Depending upon what you choose to believe, there are also the reports of numerous different galactic family member states that are around Earth at this time offering their assistance when they are able to. The events playing out at Standing Rock appear to be becoming the catalyst that was played out in the movie Avatar. Those anchoring the energies of honor, love, peace, and respect towards our planet have been calling out, and perhaps that call is in the process of being answered. It may or it may not play out exactly as we have seen in this movie. Just as the civilizations in the movie understood, they lived in the trust that life maintains and restores the balance of life. Humanity may or may not be a part of that equation unless we choose to be. With gratitude, it seems that many more are finally beginning to see our current ways of living and being have not been very honorable towards both humanity and our planet. Even in the movie, there had to be some physical violence to remove those who just simply would not leave quietly nor peacefully. They chose to fight to the very end, and in the end, it was life that restored the balance of life, bringing the needed help to defeat those who would seek to destroy and upset that balance of life. A price was paid. The huge tree in the movie was destroyed, and perhaps this was a symbol of some kind of catalyst or event that was to trigger the actions to achieve the necessary change and defeat the darkness of the invading humans. Some listeners will be aware that there are some sources who have been describing some kind of event that is to knock down the first domino and commence a process of escalating shift and change that will ultimately lead humanity and the planet to an existence into a higher vibration form of being, what some have described as a fifth-dimensional existence. Many are legitimately confused as to what this event may be. I offer the personal speculation that different sources have described different types of events, be they political, be they financial, be they celestial, be they galactic, with the intention of keeping humanity guessing so as to not risk creating fear within the minds of those who have no idea of what is to come. As frustrating as this might be for me personally, I do kind of understand this. Sadly, many humans will misinterpret any event and perhaps try to associate it positively or negatively based on one's personal worldview in that current moment of now. As we begin making our way into yet another holiday season, would it not be lovely if everyone turned the holiday more into a celebration of our planet? The tree, either real or fake, becomes the symbol of what we are celebrating. I personally no longer resonate with the religious aspect of the holiday. I also no longer resonate with the commercial aspect of the holiday. I love, however, to go skating, and I would love to do that again. It has been far too long, and perhaps even take a ride on a horse-drawn sled through the snow, especially with a special woman. What I cherish most, however, is sitting down at the end of the day and admiring my mother's tree, or perhaps my own tree, if I am able to have one somewhere. I will never be able to do a tree the way my mother does. She hates all the tacky commercial decorations, as do I, but her tree has decorations that look like handcrafted items and other very natural items. Trees in various stores just simply cannot touch what my mother is able to do to a tree. I do not get to put up a tree much anymore because I have not had my own place to live for almost 10 years. However, on my tree I mostly have natural decorations, and I also have one decoration from each of the many countries I have visited. This has become very symbolic and important to me, the uniting of nations, cultures, and people on a single tree representing life, at least to me. Are there perhaps new culinary traditions that you could introduce to either yourself or your family this year? Maybe there are some things that could be done differently, in a more life-honoring way. If your family does not do so already, perhaps you may be able to make a pumpkin pie, for example, from scratch, together with everyone, instead of simply buying one. I realize that this is not possible for everyone. At this time, we are focusing on so many events that are negative, even if we know that the eventual outcome of a negative event will ultimately be positive for humanity and the planet. I might gently offer a suggestion that, instead of praying or meditating for an end to things we do not want, to instead focus on praying or meditating in gratitude for what we are wanting to co-create and take energies away from things of negativity. Do your best to see that what you want is already here and manifested. I suppose, like John Lennon, I imagine things in a different way than others that others cannot with their current lifestyle choices. without the religion and without the commercialism. I confess I am a die-hard romantic when it comes to this particular holiday season, and it would be nice to finally find that peaceful warrior queen who has also a soft spot or a die-hard romantic nature when it is appropriate. I'm probably not going to be able to enjoy that tree this year either. I'm not quite sure yet where I will be after I finish up on this health trip. It is perhaps my prayer that many of you will resonate with this idea and perhaps seek to incorporate something from another country on your tree and turn it into a mindful celebration of what we all share on our planet and what we are envisioning moving forward in the co-creation of a new Earth. Even more than this, I personally am envisioning this new Earth as a birthing galactic star nation with all the beauty, joy, love, peace, health, and abundance for all. This is my grown-up Christmas list. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary available on the website. CVN can be followed through its Facebook page, Minds page, and YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that one only needs power when one is intending to do something harmful. Otherwise, love is enough to get everything done. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your hearts, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.